Welcome to my video. We visited the American Celebration on Parade in Quicksburg, Virginia. It's a museum with full-size parade floats that have been used in presidential inaugural parades, the Tournament of Roses parades, and many others. Our tour guide was exceptional, and he told us the interesting history of this amazing place with all these great parade floats. Hope you like the video.
Made by God and endowed with love, crawling in their nature, dreams toward the sky.
50 minutes with me going through the building, looking at some of the parade floats individually. There's also a lot of props in here from some of the events, and I'll kind of explain the type of events that the company does. I'm going to start with the history of the Hargrove Company to kind of explain why all of this exists. Now, I know you've all just come from the Caverns. He started the Hargrove Company 18 years old. Never had any training of art. He just was a gifted artist. Most of what you saw in that display was built by him very early in his career. He would have been 18, 19, 20, 21 years old at that time frame that he was building those type of windows. But what he initially wanted to do with the Hargrove Company was to bring to Washington, D.C. some of the magic that New York and Chicago were known for with these window displays. At the time, mid-40s, there were no companies in Washington that built windows like that. And the tradition really began that they were customized pieces of art, pieces of window displays. So, he thought, well, I'm going to start this company. He was very good at convincing people that he could do things. Also talented at following through and accomplishing what he promised to do. But he basically hit the street, walked streets in DC in what was then known as the shopping district, and convinced a lot of the merchants that the more of you to participate, the better. I want this to be an event so that going into the holiday season, they would have an unveiling. And it truly was an unveiling. The displays were behind curtains. People would come downtown in droves and watch this, and all the windows would unveil at the same time. And it was a lot of fun. And all of that in Washington, D.C. came from, an 18-year-old, began with two people, Mr. Hargrove and his father. He liked to say he strong-armed his dad into being the financial backing for the company. The father was involved in some of the decorating, but really the artist behind it initially was Earl Hargrove. That is Mr. Hargrove in this picture. Well, anyway, that was at New Orleans. He liked that picture himself because he said, you can look at me and tell what type of person he was. He enjoyed celebrations, he enjoyed fun, family, getting together, just having a good time, and he basically built this company to reflect that. So it began with the window art. In the lobby of this building, a couple pieces there kind of tie in with the window art part of his company, although he chose these pieces because they just reminded him of how his company started. He also wanted to show what the artwork looked like in a little bit different era. Window art, his business is going well, but he was the type of person always looking for the next job. I knew him well. There was almost a nervous energy about him that you always had to be thinking to the next thing. He wanted to know what was going to be happening next. Instead, you can look at that picture and tell this is not a shy person. He darts out the door. I'm going to meet the president, and strikes up a conversation. The president allowed him about 10 minutes, and then at the end of that conversation, Mr. Hargrove went back in and told his dad, well, you're not going to believe it, but we got another job. The president offered me opportunity to help decorate the inaugural ball. So that was how the Hargrove Company first became associated with presidential inaugurations. That is the longest and biggest job the company has had and continues to have. Every 4 years, it's not a given. You have to put a bid in for the work. But this company has done every inauguration from Truman's in '49 all the way to President Trump's earlier this year. A hand in it, or in some instances, all of them. So it's an amazing amount of work and a terrific job that came out of that, chance meeting with the president. So that was how he really began getting involved in doing events. The event work is what has lasted through all of the years that Hargrove has been around. It's now a 300-person, 300 employees, and they do trade shows, auto shows, still a lot of government work, White House work. You think of an event where you need a lot of staging, props, decorations, you know, audio visual, all of that, that's what Hargrove does.
Where are they headquartered now?
Lanham, Maryland,
Maryland.
just outside the Beltway. So the original storefront office for them was in downtown DC, but as they grew, they parade float. I'm pretty sure we can build you a parade float also. That didn't immediately kickstart this tradition, but when he got involved in doing presidential parades and the presidential parade floats, he liked for the float to be specific to the president. He wanted the float to be something that the president would kind of respond to. And that was new. Previously, you know, for Truman's parade, you know, there may be patriotic floats. Floats actually date all the way back to Martin Van Buren. He was the first president to have parade floats, and then that tradition continued. But a lot more effort went into them once you get to the modern presidents, and you had the Hargrove Company building these floats. So for a piece of the company that he never really intended to do, it turned into his favorite, and that's why he chose parade floats as the subject for this building. Probably 30, 35 years of being very, very involved in major parades across the country. Gained the reputation. For a long time, he was referred to as America's premier float building company. Also had the nickname, or the Secret Service code name, President's Prop Man. That tied into the work that he did, you know, for the White House. You know, just a phenomenal career that came out of this interest in art and this ability to kind of, timing was right, got the company up and running, it worked well. But several key pieces of it, the window art and the parade float, have kind of come and gone. What you're going to see in this building are floats that are about 30 years old. That's the age of this exhibit. This as an art form, unfortunately, is slipping away as we speak. He anticipated that maybe another 15, 20 years from this point, and this art form would be gone, which is really kind of unfortunate because it was a uniquely American art form. Now, before we head in time, JFK's inauguration, most people, I'm sure, at the event were familiar with the story of the PT-109. It was the subject of several books at the time, the heroism around it. So for Hargrove, it was kind of an obvious choice, but the president, his request for the parade was, you know, I want the naval midshipmen to march through the parade. You can do whatever else you want for the parade. I want the naval midshipmen to march through the parade. Well, Mr. Hargrove immediately thought to himself, well, I'm going to one-up that a little bit, and built the replica of the PT boat. So midshipmen march by. Here comes this PT boat. The president, from what we were told, was thrilled to see that that's what, you know, we had done, you know, for his parade. The image of it that they showed quickly on there, the Capitol in the background, the PT boat in the foreground, landed on the cover of Life magazine, and for the first time credited Hargrove with, you know, building this presidential float. Kind of did a little blip of a story about this little company that built parade floats that were specific to the president. And that really set the tradition of trying to do something, you know, just that, you know, that would be really special for the president. George Bush, the elder George Bush, when he was elected, Mr. Hargrove immediately knew, I'm going to find the model of the Avenger. The plane that the president was shot down on in World War II, was able to locate a functioning model. It was flown to Washington, built the base of the float to look like an aircraft carrier, and sent that through the streets of Washington, D.C. with the wings, you know, open, sidewalk to sidewalk. The part that actually became kind of a tearjerker for the president was that float got to the revering stand. The men on the float started waving at the president. They were squadron members that the president had served with.
Wow. How cool.
And that's the attention to detail a lot of times that Mr. Hargrove loved to put in these floats. Now, Ronald Reagan shook things up a little bit. If you may have heard the wording that the president asked for. When he was elected, he wasn't going to wait for us to surprise him. He had heard that there was this company that would make a float that would, you know, compete for the president, but he wanted to be involved. His request was, you know, he made arrangements to be brought to the Hargrove headquarters, sat across the desk from Mr. Hargrove and talked about what he wanted his parade float to be. And Mr. Hargrove said he never forgot that conversation, but so he had never met the president until then. He said, you know, Ronald Reagan said, well, I want the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. And Mr. Hargrove said, well,
and the temple
let me clarify. Are you saying you want them to perform at the inauguration, or you want them in the parade? He said, well, I want both. I want them performing in the parade on a float. And Mr. Hargrove said, well, how many people do you think that would be? And he said, the president said like it was nothing, I don't know, 300. And so Mr. Hargrove said, that was the last question he asked. He said, well, we'll do that for you, Mr. President. And but he said, he went home that night, told his wife what had happened, and said there was 2 or 3 nights of not a whole lot of sleep on wondering what he was going to do. What you
While we're all alive, a pretty little hard to see the world outside.
Wow. So many ducks.
These floats are about 30 years old. This is what Hargrove their floats would have looked like at that time frame. The process would have started with a piece of art. He liked kind of the bright, colorful art that almost looked childlike, or like a children's art form. Arizona Biltmore was the client. They are now part of Waldorf Astoria, but they were the original sponsor of this float. So that's the artwork they approved, they liked it. Then your team begins working on putting the float together. Now at the time, all of these people I'm going to reference were part of the Hargrove employees. You had a float division that focused on nothing more than building the parade floats. First part of the process, once you know what you're going to be doing, you begin with the framework. Underneath the green grass is a steel structure. Most of these floats are steel, so you need a welder. You got to have a welder on the team. Welder puts together the framework. You need engineers on your team. Obviously, floats this size you cannot put back together without having an engineer involved in this process. You had a construction contractor that oversaw the construction of it. Person whose job was transportation, and that was a huge job. I mean, think about it for a second. A float this size, you're building in a warehouse. Even to get it to the parade lineup in the same city is an ordeal. I mean. This type of float is designed so that once it's complete, and they would usually do a trial run of this to time themselves, but once it was complete, you're ready for the parade, all of this comes off. You strip this one all the way down to the green grass. That'd be the only thing left on it. All these pieces ended out on a truck or trucks. Flatbed would deliver the base of the float, take it to the parade site. Most instances, cities like Philadelphia, where we do a lot of parades, they don't want you there all day long, day before the parade. Most of the time you don't get there till after midnight, leading up to the parade. So you got, in some instances, we would do 15, 20, 25, sometimes 30 floats for that city, and you had to get them all put back together the hours leading up to the parade. So the design of this has to be designed so you can take these apart and put them together quickly. Now, the piece of the float that's hidden from view is what makes this type of float building unique, and that's that this is a vehicle. Once the framework is completed, putting the engine on, usually a 6-cylinder gas-powered engine is what Hargrove would use. The engine's right there, driver's seat directly in the front. Again, when I say this type of float, I'm speaking to the ones that are self-propelled, with that you don't even see the driver at all. So the driver's in that compartment. You don't see a door, no windows. When it's time for the parade to begin, the driver for this float was part of a team of 7 people, but the person that was inside, he actually laid down on his back, would slide underneath the framework, pull himself up into the seat, and start the engine. So he's sitting in there. It's, as you can imagine, hot. It's dark. It's loud. He waits for the word from one of the spotters. The spotters are being positioned, 3 of them on this side, 3 of them on the other side. They're wearing a headset. They communicate with the driver. They are the eyes and ears of the driver. The driver sees nothing of the parade. So the person that's actually responsible for driving the float through the city street lined with people doesn't see any of it. So when they tell him to go, his job for about 2 hours is hang on to that steering wheel, drive 5 miles an hour, and look straight down to the ground. The base of the float is a square about this big that's cut open to the ground, and he sees the red line painted on the road for the parade. And that's this person's job.
So are they not making any turns, or like they're going down one long boulevard? They're not turning anywhere?
Again,
They're following the red line?
These are the very large scale floats. Pasadena only has one turn in that parade. It's a 90-degree turn, but it is a very wide turn. It's designed for parades. Philadelphia definitely has a couple turns. DC has a lot of turns. DC has some very tight turns. So usually the tighter and the more turns there are, the smaller the parade, float has to be.
Right. I'm just
But
thinking
talk about what people think things might cost. To me, it's just interesting. I mean, a float like this, I'll tell you to look at the materials, you would never figure out what it costs because the materials, honestly, are the inexpensive part of it. The processes, the engineering, the actual artistry, the transportation to and from the parade. Yeah, all right, so far you're headed in the right direction, but we got a long way to go.
well,
70?
now they
100,000.
I'm sure 550.
So 30 years ago, 350 is what we would charge for a float
Wow.
like this. Today's
Wow.
dollars, the conversation begins at $1 million.
Wow.
You don't get a float like this for under $1 million now.
Wow.
So companies like the organization that puts on the Tournament of Roses, they understand that, they know what goes into it. Disney, if you see Disney parade floats at any of the parks, it's just inexpensive. It's the theming of this is the Aladdin story with the genie rising up out of the lamp to grant 3 wishes. But looking at that, 32 feet height, the width is 47 feet from fingertip to fingertip. That part was particularly troubling as far as maneuvering this through a city street. But part of the design of this, to tie in with the theming of the Aladdin story, for example, in Philadelphia, when this was used there, the spectators would have been about as close as I am to the float. But once this started down the road, the entire genie's body on top of the lamp began to revolve 180 degrees back and forth. So you've got that 47-foot width revolving. This would have been positioned so that the street lamps that were along the sidewalk, there's no overhead lines, wires, or stoplights, but you had the street lamps. This would have been designed so the hand would be over top of those. But also, more importantly, to tie in with the theme, it was as if the genie with the magic wand in one hand, the hand would sweep over the crowd like she was granting her wish. And that kind of continued the theming into the spectators. A lot of times, people that love parades, they see something like that, they're going to applaud and cheer, and judges will reward you with your best in parade. But you want things to be fresh and new each time, so you do a lot of recycling. What we've done with this scene, Mr. Hargrove picked pieces from 4 different floats, just wanted to create the scene where Cinderella's on the way to the ball, and kind of put that together that way. The carriage, though, is what is historically significant to us in this setting. Only time in history that the First Lady ever had a parade float. Parade floats for the president began with Thomas Jefferson, or parades began with Thomas Jefferson. The first float was Martin Van Buren, and that began that tradition. Nowhere along the line was the First Lady ever given consideration. I don't know why, but Barbara Bush, her team, they wanted to first wanted to surprise her. They wanted to have a float for her, but they wanted it to be a children's theme to tie in with her advocacy of children's literacy. That was a big cause of hers. So they came to us, said, let's do this. Put some rough sketches together. We'd like to give her 3 options, and we'll take them to her and let her decide what she wants her float to be. Well, we found out she was so excited that she was going to be the first lady to have a parade float. This is what she picked. The original artwork is kind of tucked back there behind in front of the swan. That's what the original design of this float looked like. She's winking at you. Only one eye opens and closes. Especially she's winking while she performs this trick. But she's balanced on one leg, holding the swing in her trunk with the baby swinging. So the artistry behind this, the artist knew what they wanted people to see when they first looked at the float, which was this part of it, the baby swinging. The engineer involvement in this is why we've chosen this one for this exhibit, because as you can imagine, a lot of steel, a lot of weight. And trying to figure out how to make this balance on one leg was, a pretty big task. Once the float drove past you when you were at the parade, that's when you began to notice or see a little bit better view of what was really happening. Just don't bump your head on these pieces, but we have left the door off if you want to peek inside and see what the framework would look like. That's a very good indication of maybe twice That's a lot of steel that goes into
It is, yeah.
design. Motorized. The animation was a person inside of the float. And that tradition, continues to this day with some of the parade floats like this. So this person sat there, they just pulled a wire that connected. They never owned it. They're paying all that money.
They're paying just to
Yep.
get out there for that one.
So they're
parade.
paying for us to
I heard
design
you
a
say
float.
that
that
earlier,
they
but I
own.
didn't realize that
Yeah.
they did not own the float.
Most of the companies will equate that to, if they want to be advertised at a parade like the Rose Parade, if they were to price airtime to air commercial, that would be more expensive than the cost of the float. And a lot of times it's a lot more fun to actually, just have the float with their name on it.
They did originally use the bears.
So this went through the Rose Parade. Bears were covered in white flowers. I don't know a lot about flowers, but I was told Everlasting. Is that a flower that any of you have heard of? I'm gonna look that up. Anyway, some type of white flowers. It was not a snow scene though originally in that parade. Brought it back from the Rose Parade afterwards, took it to DC, stripped it, and that's when the white fur was added. They did a pretty good job of making these look pretty realistic in a fun sort of way. Added the snow, and the end result was we thought to ourselves, this looks like Coca-Cola. So this is an example of a float that was completed. And we took a chance, reached out to a company and said, hey, look, we've got this float that looks like your advertisement. Are you interested? Sent them some pictures. They ended up using this, several times in Atlanta, where the Coca-Cola headquarters are. Bears that were animated. The one that was laying on its back, when I mentioned that this was people inside of it, this had 4 people, 1 driver and 3 animation people. The person that did that one actually stood on the base of the float. Basically like that, their torso is inside of there and they just rock it up. And it's supposed to be, of course, the fictional serpent pulling King Neptune through the bottom of the ocean.
The artwork's really
It's just
nice up there too.
Yeah. Actually, I went back to Hargrove's 2-3 years ago when we started doing this as a tour.
Here
And went
he
through
is.
their art.
In the line.
Now,
And I know you've seen all
the
this in
animation on
motifs.
this is an
Yeah, I mean,
example.
they have
Yeah,
all their
the
own
pieces and
props and
stuff. I
things.
know.
That's
The
all
serpent
they do
moved.
on them.
We had steam coming out of its mouth the day of the parade.
Nice.
Wow.
The central
fire.
part of the float, though, looking at the fish and some of the sea life, there's a couple schools of fish. I think there's actually 24 fish there altogether, tucked in the float. They're attached with a spring-like piece of metal. That allowed them to shake and move when the float was being driven down the road. So just the movement from driving on the road would allow them to move enough. It looked like the fish were swimming. Be able to take them apart, get them to the city, and then put them back together there.
I can see that, how you could see those fish would just kind of be as with the movement of on the street. Pretty cool.
I need another motor. My motor burned up, but the wheels. Now, I know I've mentioned the Rose Parade a couple times. I want to clarify a little bit the connection between Hargrove and the team that built the float structure for the Rose Parade. The Eagle came from the Rose. That was changed from roses to flowers, and they needed to be live. And then ultimately, it was changed to it can be any organic like material. So while this was a big float application, the leaves were still green on the upper side, but brown on the underside, the way magnolia leaves are. The head and the tail feathers are pampas grass plumes. This is coconut husk right here on the bottom of the leg. All of the dark brown highlighting on the side of the bird and the wings. The dark brown is coffee grounds. So it's just kind of interesting. I mean, if you think about it, it's like a huge floral arrangement going on in the rose.
It is. To see it in person, I was truly taken back because the detail
Most Republican and conventions, whether Republican or Democrat, thinks that Hargrove, that's a body of work that goes on behind the scenes and events like that, to try to put it all together. Pirate this, and this is the way that the float appeared in that direction. Now, for us, the big surprise came after the parade. Susan does not rent floats from other companies. They pretty much build everything themselves. And they hadn't made any kind of a pirate ship. And they thought when they saw this, well, that can easily be converted to a pirate ship. They added to the sails, the flags, and skeletons, and they set it outside the venue. This part of the room, much more spacious than the front. This is intended to be used for the events that come and goes. When we built the booth, these pieces, these are all unreal, very easy to move in. We will be closed in September, preparing for the haunted house, and then every weekend in October, and including Halloween night. President, are you supposed to be?
I'm President Miller of 2038.
The first female.
When we walk out on stage, the idea was, the placement of this was, the president would make a few comments from the stage at the inaugural ball, and then you could take pictures of him with the inaugural seal behind. So we wanted to keep that piece of our history piece in there. And the Spirit of 76 figures are pieces that came off. He did strike up a friendship with Mr. Harper. They became very good friends. Mr. Harper was on the list of people that needs to be invited to the ranch to get a farewell from the president before he passed away. Of course, nobody was allowed to see the president. Well, anyway, 4 years into his presidency, building the American flag, which promised you will include streets. Now, the chairs on the front are, to speak to what happened, similar to what you see here, the chairs, ride on chairs, and they brought as many as on stage at the inaugural ball. This printed white carpet, this piece of it's blue, but the rest of it is white, and it's printed with the machine that prints the band. Presidential seal in the center. Each of the times we've done this, the perimeter of the rug has a little bit different design, depending on the president. This was President Trump's first. We just put 45 stars in the perimeter of the circle. So this piece had 45. Well, guys, I'm going to turn you loose at this point.
I appreciate that.
And thank you for saying. I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but I'll say it again. When you finish,
I thought it was
last float on the right with the pelican,
This was a lot.
that one is the one we have to walk away, walk behind it, you'll see the steel framework inside the motor. And if you want to sit in the driver's seat, you can see that experience of the landing.
Big, how long. I love the big one.
I mean, I like when
It is.
President Miller was behind the podium. We could have all been up there. We could have her cabinet.
We can do her cabinet.
We can do that.
You can still, do y'all wanna do that one instead of this?
All right, let's go do that.
Somebody left their photo here.
I get it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, where's Barney? Hello, Barney. Didn't think I'd see you here. Big train.
We were a little bit skeptical at first, but we all agreed. We zipped through, a lot of times 5-10 minutes would be on, they didn't read anything. And Kathy wants people to hear some of the bad stories.
I think she's right, it's a personal touch.
Same thing, put a piece of paper in front of somebody.
I mean, I'm still kind of old school and like
Be a little bit better.
well, I think they have some adjustments that are something comforting about it that, you know, that I just enjoy that.
This is great.
And be certain that we included a saxophone. Because remember, he would bring the saxophone.
Oh, yeah.
So, Dixieland Band theme to this, the
And the
jukebox is
saxophone.
part of it, it's just the sax, you
I
know,
missed
in
the saxophone.
the front.
Does it play?
During the parade, there was
Oh, the
music.
jukebox, I didn't know.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
neat.
on this one, that's actually where the driver was, underneath the jukebox. So they were
Oh, wow.
all the way in the very back of this parade float.
That must have been quite a task to drive.
Wow.
How long were they in there? An hour, a couple hours?
Most of these parades, they're very large parades, 2 hours, you know, if not more. Sometimes the inaugural parade would drag on longer than that. But when driver would be different parades, this followed panel in the back one, so they would make living quarters, and again, looking at, you know,
So this is open, so we've been some ventilation system.
would have been, I mean, just, what's coming in.
I was just thinking about how hot that engine can be.
Well, it's hot. Our answer to that, or I tell people a lot of times, the person that designed that space, we never had problems finding people driving floats, because it was still just kind of a fun thing to be able to say, I drove float through this such and such parade, and the same with the animation, short person. The way this is designed
Oh,
now,
it's designed for the person
Yep.
driving.
you know, because, that was,
Yeah,
you got to,
the gas and the brake. So he had to hold that at 5 miles an hour. He didn't have a little lever he could set it at 5 miles an hour.
no.
Bring it up maybe to the float to operate things or lights or something.
I mean, I'm wondering if that, or if that was, like you said, part of, because this was not necessarily animated, but like I said, it had music and then the lighting and all of that, and that was part of it. These pieces were also not here during the parade. This is part of this exhibit where we put these with pictures of other floats that we've done during the parade. This was just, the pedal paper was the bottom of the
Yeah,
jukebox.
that's a cute float.
Wow.
Yeah, this
that's
is the
nice.
one. See, that says American Celebration. This is one that he put together. There's my brother and his little boy.
Is that Joe?
Yeah, it was some time
I met
ago.
Joe up here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But this,
I'm Joe, by the way, too. That's why.
okay. Well, Joe's full name is Joseph Earl, so he's my brother that was named after Mr. Hargrove.
Oh, cool.
But this is a few years back, after Mr. Hargrove had built this building. We still wanted to put floats in the Apple Blossom Parade in Winchester, which is what originally, this is drew the Hargrove team here. This was in Winchester. This was same as well. This was a kind of an Apple Blossom float.
Oh, we're gonna have to go to. That's in Winchester, right? The Apple Blossom float.
Mhm,
What time
yes.
of year is that?
It's
in
always
May?
like the first week in May.
So we missed it.
Because tourism across the states is down about 10% compared to last year.
Yeah.
In general, tourism is kind of struggling this year. Certain key tourism areas like Las Vegas is almost in panic mode.
Where are they all going? Where are the
I
tourists?
think the problem is they're not going anywhere. We're well ahead of what we were last year at this building.
We were just up at Natural Chimneys
Mhm.
and the campground up there. It's a beautiful campground. We haven't been there for years. We saw one tent with people camping out. And there weren't many people. We saw 2 people just cooking out like we were, just stopping.
Natural Chimneys, they have started doing a music festival that's already happened this year. It's earlier in the summer.
And they have jousting coming up pretty soon.
Yeah.
They're bringing the knights in there.
So when they do the music festival, they light the chimneys with all the public lights at this time.
Oh, how
to-
cool
to
is that?
see that lit up that way.
Yeah.
Especially with a lot of these LED colors, very bright, very vivid colors, to see the chimneys lit up.
It's not working good enough for a while with the audiovisual side. We worked with a guy, I can't remember his name now, but he would light up displays, he'd take the digital lights, and he'd take a building, and he could make it have different things that would all fit into the features of the building.
Yeah.
Outside of the Pentagon, so you drove down 395, you'd see veterans, you'd see names, I don't know if you can very much, you'd send a picture in of your family member. What is this display? This is kind of.
And the tree itself, we originally put here from the time the building was built, and then around the perimeter of it, we had like a small gift shop. So originally it was the tree and gift shop. Mr. Sternberg was a collector of model trains. So, you know, he sent several boxes of his model train sets and wanted us to put this together. One of the, you know, the maintenance, you know, the person that oversees the maintenance department, as it says, very artistic, put all this together. Let me go through. There's actually 3 separate tracks. The track is trying to figure out what's wrong with it.
Oh gosh, just paid 600, it's not working.
So there comes the other one, but the outer one is the one that we still got to get back together.
That's a cute little one. Kids must love this.
Yeah.
I don't know if kids like these model trains.
Well, I mean, this is definitely, you know, they like, kids like anything with a button on it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this initially, the first season without the glass, and that was definitely.
Oh, that was a disaster.
So, I mean, if you look at it, there's a lot of detail, and then look at the power lines. There's actually, you know, the lines on the power lines, and it, you know, he just put a lot of work into this.
Dreams toward the sky, they come alive in their space and time. Watch the world with me while we're all alive.
Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment.